sitting. She's watching her mom wash the dishes. And she notices there's some white hairs at the corner of her head. And she says, "Mama, why is some of your hair turning white?" And she said, "Well, every time you do something bad or something that makes me unhappy, I get a gray hair." And so the little girl said, "Well, what in the world did you do to Grandma?" We're going to go all the way back to the very, very beginning just to give us kind of an idea of what we're looking at today. Here's just an estimated timeline of our time on this earth. There was 1,056 years between Adam and Noah, 400 years between Noah and Abraham, 430 years between Abraham and Moses, and around 1,500 years from Moses to Jesus. So the Old Testament period covers a time frame of about 3,500 years. Of course, there's from 2026 to 2030 years between Jesus and us, meaning there's a total of 5,500 to 6,000 years that we've been on this earth. We're going to go all the way back to the time between Noah and Abraham. This is immediately after the flood, where God has brought Noah, his three sons, their wives, and Noah's wife out of the ark, and he tells them some very specific instructions. He said, "Then God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth.'" That was the important part. Be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. Then about midway through Genesis 9, verses 19 through 27, Noah's middle son, Ham, laughs at his father's nakedness. Because of this, Noah curses Ham. Now he blesses Shem and he blesses Japheth, but he curses Ham, and specifically, he curses Ham's son, Canaan. And we'll come back to Canaan in just a minute. But it's interesting that Noah specifically curses Canaan instead of just cursing Ham, the one who sinned against him. Now in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, it says God punishes sons for the sins of their fathers up to the third or fourth generation. Now a lot of the time this is not just straight punishment, it's that nobody changes. The same behaviors are evident, so the same punishment gets put upon them. But God puts enmity between Canaan's heirs, which become the Canaanites, and between the heirs of Shem, who become the Israelites. Now you remember the land of Canaan was the promised land. That's the land that God promised to the Israelites when they came out of Egyptian slavery. After they spent 40 years in the wilderness, they went over into Canaan, which was the promised land. We still sing to this day, "To Canaan's land I'm on my way, where the soul of man never dies." Somebody's taken that example of the Israelites going into the promised land and applied that to what Jesus has done for our life. When we reach Canaan, when we reach the promised land, that's the heaven that we're looking to occupy. Canaan is the land that the Israelites still occupy to this very day. So once God promised it to them, they kept it. But the family of Ham didn't go so well. Ham had a son named Cush, and he fathered a man named Nimrod. Now Cush fathered Nimrod. He became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. So verse 8 and 9, talking about Nimrod, they call him a mighty one. They call him a mighty hunter before the Lord. And then they finally give him a whole title, Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Now, mighty hunter in this scenario here is not talking about his ability to go out and hunt for animals and food. This is a little darker. This was his ability to persecute and oppress people. The very name Nimrod means to rebel. That's what his name meant. And when it says before the Lord, notice it didn't say for the Lord, but before the Lord, meaning he felt he could disregard God. He could be this mighty hunter in the face of God. And that comes into play when we see what he decides to put together later. But he becomes a very powerful king in Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq. But he is also considered to be the world's first dictator, the world's first oppressor of people. The cities that he founded, many of them, they either still know where they are, or there's other cities that are built on top of them. Now, Babel and Babylon were not built in the exact same place, but very close together, still in that modern day Iraq. But Nimrod's the one that leads the very first organized rebellion against God. Jewish historian Josephus wrote that he was a tyrant whose very purpose was to turn people away from God. And he is the one that begins to direct the construction of the Tower of Babel. So that moves us into Genesis chapter 11, the first 4 verses. Now all the earth used the same language and the same words. And it came about as they journeyed east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Then they said to one another, "Come, let's make bricks and fire them thoroughly." And they used brick for stone, and they used tar for mortar. And they said, "Come, let's build ourselves a city, and a tower whose top will reach into heaven. And let's make a name for ourselves, otherwise we will be scattered abroad over the face of the earth." So 2 very important factors that come to light here. The whole earth had one speech, one language. And they were beginning to migrate en masse. They were going different places as a group. And so they reached this area in what was called Shinar then, becomes Mesopotamia, now called Iraq. They decide this is a beautiful place. After the flood, they are growing quickly. Now they're fulfilling the be fruitful and multiply part, but they're not filling the earth. They're growing, but they're making their own society and their own civilization. And then Nimrod and his counselors realized, we've got to do something to hold these people together. Now people are starting to think about doing what God has asked and migrating out. And so instead they give them this vision of this great city, but also this great religious center. And there they decide to build this tower, which is called a ziggurat. Now a ziggurat is much like a pyramid, except there's a shrine on top. The stairways wind around it as you go up. They said the base is probably 1,200 feet by 1,200 feet at the bottom. It's very large. And this is the tower that they begin to build. And the people are very excited about this. In the verses that we read, it said, come, let's make the brick. Come, let's build this city. So whatever idea Nimrod had pitched them, they're excited about it. They're thinking, hey, this may be something. The problem was, it was all secular. Notice in all those verses, we don't read a thing about God. Just about the people, what they're going to do, how it's going to affect them. They wanted to make a name for themselves. They wanted the historical fame. This was important to them for recognition, for reputation, for glory. They weren't thinking about anything else. What makes this odd is we're just talking about a number of generations after the flood. So they know the exact reason that God destroyed the earth. And yet they've already forgotten the lesson. They're already going back to the same ways and the same reasons that God destroyed them in the first place. And so this was to be a great memorial to the greatness of the people and not to the greatness of the God who saved them. So everything about this is just egotistical. It's self-serving. This is taking God completely out of our plans, out of our lives. And so it's pretty easy to see the mistakes that they're making. In hindsight, it's always easy to see the mistakes. Number one, they're leaving God out of their search for security and unity. They don't include Him in their plans. Sort of sounds familiar for a lot of people, doesn't it? They deny God a part in it. Not only do they not invite Him, they specifically keep Him out. They deny Him that ability to get in there and join them in this endeavor. They're thinking mankind could function without God. And they're ignoring the deepest need that mankind has, and that is our need for God. After the flood, God told them, you be fruitful, you multiply, you fill the earth. They decided, no, we want to stay together. We want to build a tower and become our own God. We want something to celebrate me. And so they're building something very specific. They're building a religion that doesn't involve God. This is a man-made religion that says, in my world, I'm God. And that's who we're going to celebrate. They wanted to build something that could surpass God, a stairway to surpass Him. They wanted to make a path that would avoid God and ways to become their own gods. And so this tower was to be the symbol of all their work and all their effort. Look how great I am. And this is the point where today's lesson actually begins. Because how much different does that sound than the way a lot of the world views God today? So 5,000 years ago, things weren't much different people-wise. We have not changed that much. So what do we get from this? We're making the exact same mistakes today. We try to do a lot of stuff without God. We don't go in and ask His opinion. This morning in class, we were talking about sacrifices. There's a sacrifice they would do called a wave sacrifice, where before they used something, they had a particular way they would wave it. And so honor God with whatever they were going to do. So if it's a pair of glasses, I'm going to wear the glasses. Then they still wanted to honor God in doing it. But these people are trying to reach God through their own works, their own efforts. They don't want to reach Him to be with Him. They want to reach Him to surpass Him, to show that they don't need Him. They want the fame and the recognition and the riches for themselves. They feel no need to share that. Why not, when I can have it all? Some of them want to reach God through their own goodness and morality. When we tell God, hey, we don't need you, then every good thing we do is for our own benefit. It's because we want to. We'll actually talk about that more tonight as we study Matthew chapter 6, the first 4 verses, about how we treat others. This is when people want to be their own God and they feel they have no need of God at all. Again, that's something that's very familiar today. We see it out everywhere we go. So I want you to ask yourself, are you trying to get through this life based on your own work and effort? I've told you before, coming here on Sunday morning doesn't solve your problems. If God's not with you every step of the way, you're trying to do it on your own and you'll fail. That's not a maybe. You will fail. without knowing that God has you in His embrace. Can you imagine trying to live life without relying on God for direction, for hope, for peace? I've gotten to the age I can't imagine that anymore. There's too many times that God has been there and helped us when we needed it. I can't imagine trying to do it without Him. I can't imagine trying to live without His love and without trying to show that love to the people I come in contact with every day. A lot of people think it is more important to be known and recognized than to be good and kind. I don't believe that. I believe it's better to be good and kind and loving to others, even if no one ever sees it. That's a big one. People want to be seen doing good things today, but who does that benefit? You're trying to make people look at you and say, hey, look, I help those people. I'm a good person. God says that does not make you a good person. Because if God is not involved in your life, you have made yourself your own God. Idolatry is anything that comes between us and God. And if that's you, you have become your own God. You're worshiping self. If everything is about you, it cannot be about God. So do you recognize your need for God? Or does it take when bad things happen, when family passes, when fights happen, when someone runs away? Nimrod did not recognize a need for God. He said, we don't need Him. We're going to build this tower on our own. We're going to keep all the people together, and we're going to become greater than God. Now, we don't quite take it that far, but until we admit that we have a need for God, we're being a Nimrod. Growing up, when somebody called you a Nimrod, meant you were an idiot. It's funny that his name, to rebel, has come up to mean something, a name that was so feared back at that time. So I'm telling you this morning, don't be a Nimrod. Don't let yourself become more important than your God. Have you walked a path that involves belief and faith and repentance and confession and baptism and the loving and teaching of others? That's part of what God asks of us. And there's still a lot of other religions out there that want to take our views away from God. We know of ones like Muslim, Buddhism, Islam, but there's many others, astrology, humanism, secularism. These are things that take that focus away from God and put it, if you can trust the stars but not believe in God, you've got a lot more faith in something than I do. Because I trust the one who put them there, not just what's there. It's a lot different. Jesus said it very, very clearly in John chapter 14, verse 6. He said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. The builders of the Tower of Babel didn't know that. They didn't know Jesus. They didn't realize the plan that God had made, the one that started when Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, because they'd given up trusting God at all. They decided to rely on themselves. They were just focused on what makes me happy, what satisfies me, what makes it to where I don't have to worry about anything. And that includes, I don't have to worry about your problems. I don't even want to deal with my own. It sounds awful familiar, like so many other people do today, because we need to understand that we have a need for God. We need His help. There are people that can be born, they can live, they can die, and never know God. But without God, the end is complete. And with God, there's eternity. C.S. Lewis was talking to an atheist once, and the atheist said, well, what are you going to do if you're wrong? C.S. Lewis said, if I'm wrong, all I've done is lived a good life. But if you're wrong, you're in a lot of trouble. With the faith that we have, yeah, we all question God sometimes. We wonder why we have to go through this, or why these things happen, or why we lose people, or even why friendships fall apart. But what do you think this society would really look like without God? What scares me is each year we get closer to finding out. Each year we're moving further and further away from God. We forget that one of the reasons our nation was built for the very religious freedom that we overlook today. We've left that part out. And so even today, people ignore God. God gave them instructions. You be fruitful, you multiply, you fill the earth. People said, nah, we're just going to stay here. And so God said, we'll see about that. Now I want you to think about this moment. Really think about it. The night before, everybody speaks the same language. There's not even another language to speak. There's one language. And the next morning, you can't understand anyone. Now, I don't know if families were allowed to speak to each other, if he kept families together speaking to each other, or if even families, if husbands and wives couldn't communicate, if fathers and sons and mothers and daughters couldn't communicate. But think for a minute about the chaos of this day, where suddenly you understand no one. And you have to go around literally talking until somebody says, I understand what that person's saying. And eventually these groups break out and move away from the other groups. And they go and they fill the earth. You know, the very place we get the word Babel from is the Tower of Babel. Because to babble means to talk rapidly and continuously in a foolish or incomprehensible way. They said, we're not going to do what God said. God said, yes, you are. And he made it happen. So what is God going to have to do to you to get you to understand your need for him? That's the question that we should be asking ourselves every day. And that's the very lesson that we learn from the Tower of Babel. God is there. Can't get around him, can't go over him, can't go through him. But you can go into it. You can go into his love, into his son's blood. You can't find eternity without Jesus or without God. That's what Jesus told us. I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. So it's not even worth trying to find peace in life without God. Trying to find faith in life without God. Trying to find love in life without God. A lot of people think that the money and the cars and the fame, that all that's going to make them happy. If that's the case, then why are the lives of so many rich people such a mess? Because ultimately that really has nothing to do with happiness. Psychologist told me years ago, the happiest man drives a station wagon. Now that was back before the minivan was made. It took me a long time to figure it out. But the happiest person, the richest person, are those that are happy at home with whatever they have. So what will it take for you to see the areas in your life where you need God? And let's do that before he confuses us any further as we walk away from him. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's all stand and sing.